Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu unserer neuesten Videoproduktion. Mein Name ist Carlo, ich bin vom Queerreferat im Asta der JGU Mainz und wir haben vor einiger Zeit mit Tatjana vom Legal Defense Project in Russland gesprochen über die aktuelle Situation von Transpersonen in Russland, die rechtliche Situation, aber auch die allgemeine gesellschaftliche Situation, wie für Transpersonen in Russland die Lage aussieht, um die Personenstandsänderung durchzuführen, die Namensänderung durchzuführen, aber auch die eigene Transition zu beginnen und wie sich die Situation von Transpersonen und der gesamten LGBTIQ-Community in Russland regelmäßig verschärft und auch immer wieder unter Angriff steht durch konservative Kräfte im Land. Und wir freuen uns, euch hiermit so ein bisschen die Situation von LGBTIQ-Menschen in Russland darzustellen, mit einer Person, die direkt von Ort berichten konnte. Und ich wünsche euch sehr viel Spaß mit dem Interview. Hello and welcome to our first interview in this semester. My name is Carlo from the Queer Department, the Department for LGBTIQ students at the University of Mainz. And we are now talking to Tatjana from the Transgender Legal Defense Project in Russia. Hello, Tatjana, how are you?
Hello, fine. How are you?
Well, I'm fine too. We're just going into the second lockdown here in Germany due to the coronavirus. Well, maybe you could tell a little bit how is your personal situation right now in Russia, and how are the state measures due to the pandemic?
The second lockdown is not here yet, and we don't know whether it will be here in a couple of days or in a couple of weeks, or we will have no second lockdown. We have to wear masks in public places. In our office, we have we work mostly from home, but we can come to the office if we need to do so. So that is the situation.
Yeah.
But the restaurants are open, the bars are open, but if you go to a night bar or a nightclub, you have to get a QR code, and if someone who was there together with you gets a positive test for COVID-19, you will be informed about it.
Yeah. Well, your project, which was launched in 2012, offers free legal assistance in first time to transgender people who are trying to change their legal documents, and who you are also protecting against legal discrimination. In this last 6 months now, in the pandemic, how has COVID-19 impacted your work other than being in the home office?
Well, most of the work we do is providing legal consultations to people. So we didn't stop doing that. Of course, we also have some court cases which we are working on right now. And of course, when the courts were closed, when there were no hearings, we didn't have any hearings on those cases either. So right now, one of our most important cases, it's in the European Court of Human Rights right now, and it was communicated last November. So when the European Court of Human Rights provided an extension of all the time limit, a 3 months extension of the time limit. So it affected that case too. So that is how COVID-19 affected us. I don't think that it is something really, because since we are not providing, we're providing very few personal consultations, because most of the people we consult, they're not they're settled in other cities than Moscow, so we don't meet them in person. So COVID-19 didn't affect our work that much.
Yeah. Well, I think the closing of the courts was also a case here in Europe and in Germany, and it's still kind of a problem also for trans people here, because lots of meetings with the courts were postponed, and I think that's a problem basically all lawyers and all people who work in the courts and try to defend a legal case have right now and have had for the last few months. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about your work, like what are the main cases you work on mostly? On your website, you tell that you are mostly providing legal advice for people who are trying to change their legal documents. And what are the main challenges for that in Russia?
Well, fortunately, so when our project was launched, when we started working, the situation was different, was much more, was really different from how it looks like now. When we started working, so according to Russian legislation, in order to legally transition, a person should provide a sex change certificate. It's what on the law. So the law says a sex change certificate issued by a medical organization. And this certificate should be of a certain form. It was for the Ministry of Health to develop and approve this form of medical certificate. However, so the Ministry of Health was obliged to do that in 1998. However, it was not until 2018 when the certificate was actually developed. So for 20 years, the legal gender recognition procedure in Russia was neither clear, nor quick, nor simple.
Mm-hmm.
And in most of the cases, the transgender people got a medical certificate not of the form established by the Ministry of Health, of course, since there was no form, and they had to go to the courts in order to have their legal gender marker changed. And we provided help to those people, because in Russia, like in any other country, the court procedure is complicated, and if you're not a lawyer, it is really difficult for you to go to the court and to win your case, even if your case is really simple.
How many cases, like more or less, do have to go to the courts? Are there like a lot of institutions who basically decline to help trans people by, for example, not accepting a medical form?
So between 2012 and 2018, we took more than 300 cases, more than 300 legal gender recognition cases to the courts. We won most of these cases.
Mm-hmm.
But since 2018, when this form of this sex change certificate was finally developed, this is not the case. So we don't take many cases to the courts because there is an administrative procedure of legal gender recognition, and people do not have to go to courts to have their legal gender marker changed. But we still have some family rights cases and some name change cases, because in some situations, trans people do not want to change their legal gender marker, but they wish to change their name only. For example, non-binary people, since in Russia you don't have the opportunity to get any legal gender marker except male or female. So there are only two options. Many non-binary people prefer not to change their legal gender marker, but to change their name only. And unfortunately, they still face problems with when they try to get gender-neutral name, or when they try to get rid of their patronymic name, because in Russia we have the first name, the last name, and the patronymic name on your documents. And the patronymic name, it's gendered. It has an ending that clearly demonstrates whether the person is a man or a woman. So men, non-binary people, as well as even many cis people want to get rid of their patronymic name. However, it's difficult in Russia, and it requires, in many cases, it requires going to the court, and even the court cases are not always successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that on your website that right now you're in a case where a person wants to change their, I think, their legal markers and the name without having to go through a sex change. That is, well, what is basically the situation for non-binary people in Russia then? Is there even recognition in the legal terms of people who don't define as female or male?
Russian legislation does not, as I have already said, Russian legislation does not recognize any other genders except male and female. So the only opportunity is to change the legal gender marker if the person wishes. Or not to change it, but to change the name. But according to Russian legislation, the name should not necessarily be gendered. But according to our practice, according to the case law, many courts think that you cannot change your name to a gender neutral, or because it won't be obvious from your documents to what gender you belong.
Yeah. Okay, so since you've just talked about this new procedure, this administrative procedure for trans people to change their legal documents, have you had a lot of cases where people came to you and told you that this institution still isn't doing that after 2018? Or are the administrative forces basically obeying their new procedure?
Well, maybe it would be useful if I describe this procedure first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I will talk about the main problems trans people still face.
Mm-hmm.
This administrative procedure requires that a person goes to a psychiatrist and gets a transsexualism diagnosis according to ICD-10. Mm-hmm. After that, the person needs to get an approval from a medical commission composed of a psychiatrist, a sexologist, and a psychologist. And if this commission confirms that this person is a transgender person, this sex change certificate is issued. And this certificate is a ground. So this, if you have the certificate, you can go and change your legal gender marker on the documents, and you can also undergo medical transition. So the procedures for getting access to legal and medical transition in Russia are not separated. I know that this is not the case in many European countries, but this is the case in Russia. The problem, the most important problems trans people face in Russia are that state medical institutions are not obliged to have such commissions. For example, at least one commission in one region. You know that Russia is a really big country, and it takes a lot of money and time to get, for example, from Far East to Moscow or to St. Petersburg, or even to Novosibirsk, the capital of Siberia. But nevertheless, there are still many regions in Russia where there is not a single commission formed. So transgender people have to go to other regions, have to travel to other regions in order to get this certificate. Most of them get the certificate in non-governmental medical institutions, because there are very few commissions in state medical institutions. And the other reason is that there are no legally established criteria of diagnosing transsexualism. And for example, a doctor in a state medical institution can require, like, for example, for 2 years of observance. So for example, the person should come every month for 2 years in order to be diagnosed with transsexualism. But it's really long. It's really long. It's difficult, and of course, many trans people prefer to go to non-governmental medical institutions to pay money and to get this sex change certificate more or less quickly. So the main reason is the money. The main issue, sorry, not reason, the main issue is the money. The money trans people need to travel to the commission to pay for the for this medical assessment.
Yeah, so you basically notice that there are like a whole structure of things that make it more difficult for trans people to actually get this new procedure.
No, it's not more difficult, because before 2018, trans people had to first get to that commission to pay money for traveling, for the commission, and after that to go to the court.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But there isn't any fund by the state for trans people, for example, to pay their, well, at least their travel.
No.
Nothing.
No, of course not.
Great. No, well, it sounds actually quite similar from the form of the procedure, like getting a diagnosis by a doctor and a psychiatrist and a sexuologist. That is quite similar to Germany, but, well, in difference, Germany is quite a little country with a whole lot of commissions, and basically these institutions are everywhere. And I think that makes it a lot easier here for trans people.
I don't know whether there is a single commission in the Far East. A year ago, it was not the case.
Yeah. And of these, well, if a trans person starts this procedure, what are actually the chances of getting their case admitted and their change in legal documents admitted?
You mean if the person already has this certificate?
Yeah, like if a person already has all the money to get the certificate and go before the commission.
If the person, well, there are more friendly and less friendly commissions. If you go to a more friendly commission, the chances are about 100%. If you go to a less friendly commission, the chances are lower. So it depends on the doctor. It is the doctor who decides whether the person can get this certificate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've just talked a little bit about how this entire system got a little better, at least, by this procedure. Has this new procedure, like this administrative procedure, been under attack politically? Have they tried to already get rid of it again?
This administrative procedure is not under attack politically. If you are now referring to a bill that was introduced to the State Duma recently, this bill is actually not an attack on this procedure. It's something really weird, and in my opinion, it's something the existence of this bill demonstrates that its authors simply do not understand what gender identity is, what sexual orientation is, what's the difference between these two terms, and so on. So this bill is not an attack on this administrative procedure.
Yeah, before we start talking about this bill a little more, I would like, because you've already, you've just mentioned sexual orientation also, what do you know about the legal situation of non-trans queer people, like homosexual people, and also intersexual people?
Well, in general, first of all, of course, I can speak about on this issue for hours and hours. If I am to describe the situation in general and shortly, Russia is not an LGBT-friendly country. I think it should be called an anti-LGBT country. Just a few reasons that make me say so. In Russia, no form of same-sex partnership is legal. In Russia, there is a law banning promotion of non-traditional sexual relationship against minors. And this law de facto makes impossible to hold any LGBT public events in the streets. In Russia, most hate crimes against LGBT persons are not investigated, but the most serious of these crimes, such as killings, for example, they are investigated. Not always, actually, but at least in some cases. But the hatred motive is never taken into account. I think that all in all, this makes Russia an LGBT unfriendly country. The situation of intersex persons is that the Russian legislation there is no such term as intersex in Russian legislation. So, and yes, intersex children are subject to surgery that makes them male or female, and they are subject to the surgery when they were young, in some cases even short after their birth. So of course they are not able to give their consent for the surgery. That is how I see the situation in general. If you have any more specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Well, yeah, I would like to speak a little bit more specific about the bill also, and what has come to our attention, well, over here in Germany, like the media coverage about Russia is really bad. Like there is always basically a media coverage about political speeches and things German politicals say about Russia, but there's basically no media coverage, for example, about the situation of LGBTIQ people in Russia. And which also saddens us really is that there's no media coverage about fights like yours, like organizations in Russia who are trying to fight discrimination and basically the legal discrimination, in your case, of trans people. So what I was questioning myself is, what is the media coverage inside Russia like? Are there television channels, radio channels, also social media, anything about LGBTIQ rights, and for example, with including NGOs like yours?
In Russia, most of the media outlets are controlled by the states. All the television channel, except some internet TV channels. Most of newspapers and so on and so on. There are some independent media still exist, but most of them are internet media. Some of them are, some of the newspapers have also printed versions. And those independent media, some of them are large enough. Not as large as, for example, the first channel of the Russian television, of course, but they're not like a blog that is with like 2 people working on it. These media, they cover LGBT topics, and they published articles on this bill, and they published, for example, when this bill was introduced, everything I was doing for like 3 or 4 days after that was replying to different media outlets. So yes, they know the experts on the topic, they speak to the experts, and they provide information that is not biased. But in Russia, there are many people who get information from the first channel of the Russian television. And of course, this channel will never come to me and ask for my comments on this bill.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, let's go on to the bill. So maybe you could just tell our all the people who will watch this video, by whom was this bill introduced, and what would be the main changes this bill could do?
This bill was introduced by a member of the upper house of Russian parliament, Ms. Yelena Mizulina. She is well known to Russian LGBT community because she was among those who introduced and pursued the anti-gay propaganda law in 2012-2013. She was, at that time, she was a member of the lower house of the Russian parliament. This bill, as I have already said, it is really weird. According to Ms. Mizulina's comments, this bill is aimed, the purpose of this bill is to make homosexual marriages impossible in Russia. According to her, a trans person who has, legally transitioned, enters into a heterosexual marriage, this marriage is homosexual. So,
okay.
Because the person's sex is defined at birth. And as far as I understand, of course, it's my guess, because I didn't have an opportunity to ask Ms. Mizulina in person, but it's my guess that according to her, trans people are homosexuals who change their legal gender marker in order to enter into a same-sex marriage. That I think that it is her idea.
Yeah, I see what she did there. It's
it sounds weird for you, for me, but unfortunately, it doesn't sound weird to her.
Well, actually, it doesn't sound that weird to me, because it's like a basically really, really typical transphobe argumentation. Like, well, people saying that transitioning is actually just a means to the end of something else is an argument I've heard like really, really often, and also in Germany and in many other countries in Europe. So that doesn't surprise me that much, but it is still really weird, and it doesn't make any sense in legal terms.
Yes. So what she suggests is to make it impossible to change one's birth certificate, because in Russia, the process of legal transition starts with changing your birth certificate, and after that, you can only after that you can change your passport and all other documents. So the idea of this bill is to make it impossible to change your birth certificate.
Yeah.
It will, if this bill is passed, fortunately, by now we can say that the chances of it are low, but I will speak about it further. If this bill is passed, the situation will be really, really weird, because if trans people are not able to change their birth certificate, but are still able to change other documents, we will get a situation where a person has two legal gender markers at the same time.
Yeah.
And if, according to this bill, the civil registry officers, when they get a marriage application, they will have an opportunity, not an obligation, but an opportunity to check whether the legal gender marker on the birth certificate corresponds to the legal gender marker on the passport. And if it does not correspond, the person will not be able to enter into marriage. So
that would basically mean to forbid marriage to trans people, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
To trans people who have legally transitioned. But the situation, this would be a really crazy situation, because in Russia, according to Russian legislation, men and women have different rights in some situations, different rights and obligations. For example, men are obliged to do the military service, while women are not. The retirement age for women is lower. Women can be sent only to a general regime prison, while men can be also sent to a strict regime prison. And if we create a situation when a person has two legal genders at one and the same time, it is not clear why civil registry officers should look at the birth certificate, at the gender that is on the birth certificate, and other institutions should take into account legal gender on the passport or on the birth certificate.
Yeah.
it is not clear from this bill. Another issue that is really not clear from this bill is what will happen to the marriages, to trans people marriages that are already contracted maybe like 10 years ago,
Yeah.
or 15 years ago. Because this bill, it also obliges all trans people who have transitioned to change their, who have transitioned using that administrative procedure to change their birth certificates back, to exchange them back, to get their birth certificate with the gender assigned at birth. But however, there are many trans people who have transitioned using the court procedure, and this bill says nothing about this, those people. And it gives us an understanding that those who have drafted this bill, they simply know nothing about the real legal situation of trans people and about the real legal process, how the process of legal gender recognition looked like 3 years ago or 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, okay, you've just mentioned that it isn't very, well, that there is little chance that this bill will actually get done. What are the chances right now? Well, we wanted to talk like a month ago already, so when this bill was still really on the table. What has changed since then?
Well, this bill is still on the table, but the government has commented on this bill, and it does not recommend that this bill is passed. Because this bill, maybe I should also say a couple of words about it. This bill is not only about trans people and legal gender recognition. It's also about amending Russian family code in many other aspects.
Yeah.
And the Russian government doesn't think that Russian family code should be amended in such a way. This means that the chances that this law is passed are really low. Now, the reason for us to think so is that, yes, this bill is on the table, but even the first reading has not been scheduled yet. In nowadays Russia, if there is an intention to pass a bill, it is usually passed really quickly. But this bill was introduced in July. More than 3 months, almost 4 months have passed since then, and the first reading is not scheduled. It means that the Russian legislature is not actually going to pass it.
Yeah, but are there still politicians, like for example, the people who also introduced that bill, that are pushing for it to be passed? Like actively still in media pushing for it?
I haven't heard anything about it for the last month or even 2 months. My opinion is that it was a kind of PR from Mrs. Mizulina, who yes, who likes to pursue anti-LGBT topic in media. So she likes to raise it in media, and it was a kind of her PR campaign.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course, but it's also still at least a media attack on your work and on trans people. Does something like this happen a lot?
Anti-LGBT campaigns in state-sponsored media, it's something that exists, something that always exists, but it is not. It doesn't look like an everyday campaign or something like that. So it doesn't. It doesn't mean that, for example, we have articles or like other publications portraying LGBT people in a negative way. We doesn't get him really often. But this is a kind of everyday statements that are made or so on. So usually, so state-controlled media are just LGBT unfriendly.
Mm-hmm.
They do not, they are not like really actively unfriendly, but they are unfriendly.
Okay. Well,
But may I go back and say a couple of words of the how COVID pandemic affected the situation of trans people? I have forgotten one really important issue, because that sex change certificate you get, it's valid for 1 year. It is valid for 1 year in the terms of that you have a year to go to the civil registry office and change your birth certificate.
mm-hmm.
And when there was the first lockdown, civil registry offices were closed for several months, and those whose certificate expired in that during those months, they faced some problem while getting access to legal transition. But it is something that it is a problem, but it is not really a great problem, because medical commissions that issue those certificates, they usually it's not usually a problem for them to give another certificate once the first one has expired.
Yeah. What will be most important in your work in the next few months? What are you expecting in this, well, in the still same situation as the last few months? And do you expect, for example, that there will come something else like this bill, or that problems will grow more severe also for trans people when the courts might close again?
Unfortunately, in Russia, you cannot predict the bad things that happen, because that bill, it was something really unpredictable. There was no campaign before this bill. There was no information about the fact that it is being drafted, that Mrs. Mizulina has an intention to introduce this bill. There was nothing like that. But it was like I was sitting home. It was about like 8 p.m. and one of the media outlets, one of the liberal media outlets, published a piece of news, a very short piece, stating that a bill aimed at prohibiting trans people from getting into marriage was introduced to State Duma. That is how it started. We cannot predict what happens tomorrow in the terms of our legislative initiatives.
Yeah.
We know what is happening now in the terms of that name change is becoming more and more difficult. And the last news we have that the Federal Ministry of Justice has decided to decline all the applications aimed at removing patronymic names from the documents. This is, well, the situation with the patronymic names in Russian legislation is that you are to have it unless it is not in accordance with your national tradition. Mm-hmm. That is how it's formulated in Russian legislation. And previously, it was relatively easy to get rid of your patronymic name. But now, as far as we understand, it will be really hard, not only for trans people, but for cis people also. And many cis people who are planning to emigrate, they are removing their patronymic names from their document because in English-speaking countries, in German-speaking countries, in French-speaking countries, you don't have any patronymic name. Maybe this decision was made to make lives of those who are planning to immigrate harder, but it has also affected trans people, especially non-binary people. So the other problem is that they have, so in Russia we have electronical system of providing state services. And if you want, so changing your passport is a state service, so you can apply through the internet. They made it impossible to apply for changing your legal gender marker on your passport through the internet.
Oh, great.
Nobody knows, actually. Yeah. So you need to go to the civil registry office and file an application on paper. Mm-hmm. That is not really a big problem.
Yeah, of course, but it's like a lot of small problems.
But it is something like, why are you doing that? For example, if I want to change my name, I can apply through the internet. If I, for example, have lost my passport and need a new one, I can apply through the internet.
Yeah.
But if I'm applying for changing my legal gender marker on my passport, I cannot do this through the internet. Why?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it seems that there isn't, which is the case basically in every country, I think, that there aren't a lot of people working in these offices and institutions who actually think about trans people and consider that these people also do have needs and do have a need for information, for example. Well, I wanted to ask you another one about your project in general. How many people do you have with you who are working with you on these cases and helping you? How big is your organization, and is it in trouble? Do you have difficulties financing your project? Because you're still offering free advice, aren't you?
Yes, fortunately, we still have opportunity to offer free legal advice to trans people. We are an association of lawyers. We all work part-time. There are 5 of us now working on legal cases and providing legal consultations. Of course, like any other NGO, not only in Russia, but probably everywhere, we have some trouble getting money for our work. That's the case for all NGOs and for all human rights projects.
So I think we have now talked for like an hour about a situation who still is difficult in Russia. So of course I have to ask, like, what can people in Germany do? I think in German politics there's always this mention of basically influencing the political situation in Russia through sanctions, which I am not really a fan of. So before I ask what the people who watch this video can do in order to help you, do you think that like the politics of other countries like Germany or the EU, do they actually have an influence on the Russian politics and, for example, the relationship between the state and LGBTIQ people in Russia?
Well, the only measure that really affects Russian politicians, which is seen by them as something really affecting them, is, yes, sanctions, personal sanctions. But I'm not a big fan of this measure either. In my opinion, sanctions is something you should use with regard to really grave human rights violations, like killing of LGBT people in Chechnya. When it comes to less serious violations, the one of the most effective forms is media coverage, because I'm sure that media coverage that Russian LGBT community, when I say we, I mean not like our organization, but Russian LGBT community in general, which we got with regard to this bill, led to, for example, it led to the fact that one of the members of Russian State Duma, the lower house of parliament, she spoke against this bill. It is something which happens really rare in Russia, when a member of parliament openly speaks for LGBT rights. And of course, her speech was covered by many media, including state-controlled media, which was really important. So media coverage, international media coverage, is something really important when it comes to both really grave and less serious violations, because Russian politicians, Russian authorities do not like to be looked at. They do not like the fact that they're being watched by the international community. And yes, if the more the situation in Russia is covered in international media, like German media, the more sensitive it is for them. So reposting, translating, putting Russian LGBT activists in touch with foreign media does help.
Okay. And so for our spectators right now, can they donate to your organization?
Yes, they can.
The other way?
Yes, they can donate to our organization through our partner organization, LGBT Initiative Group STIMO.
Okay.
They can send you the contacts.
Okay, and then we will put the link for that in our description for the video. so that people can actually find where they can donate to you. And well, if you want to say anything else, or if there's anything we haven't talked about yet, if not, I think we have like an hour now, which is plenty.
I don't think that we haven't. So I have the questions on the list. I don't think that we haven't covered something. I think we are okay. If you have any other questions, you still may ask them.
No, I think we have it all covered. Thank you a lot. I'm really glad that this could happen, and thank you a lot for the interview.
Thank you too, and sorry for the delay because I know that it was planned.
It was also a delay on my part. It wasn't all yours. Then thank you a lot. We would like to contact you again if there's anything new. I really would like to do something like this more often. So if
of course, you can contact me.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day.
Bye. Have a nice day too.